Hello, folks. My name's Abu, and as always, I'm joined today by Obssa
That's right.
for today's Science Fiction Book Club bonus episode about Silo Season 2!
Oh, yeah!
The show is finally out.
That's right.
We have watched Silo Season 2, Episode 1. And presumably, dear listeners, so have you.
I sure hope so.
I sure hope so, because
Yes.
we're talking about it today.
That's right.
So over the next 30 minutes or so, Obssa, we are going to share just sort of our first impressions,
Yes.
our gut reactions to
Yep.
the show so far. Obviously, it's coming out episodic, so we've seen episode 1, and that's what we're here to talk about today. As far as spoilers go, for anybody who's watching, we highly recommend that you watch all of Silo Season 1.
Yes, naturally.
Naturally.
I should hope so.
And we are covering the book on the show, so as long as you are up to the reading that we've covered through on the podcast so far, you should be good to go.
Yeah.
Because that's where you and I are in the book
That's
as
right.
well.
Yeah.
We haven't finished it yet, but we're basically in the final third of it. So as
Yeah.
long as you've read the first 2/3 of the book. Let's get into it. So Silo Season 2, Episode 1 is a fairly minimalist episode.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even not a whole lot to recap here. Like, the recap could be basically summarized as, in this episode, we follow Juliet beyond the confines of the silo into another silo right next door.
Yeah.
This one has bodies littered
Oh,
everywhere.
man.
This silo is clearly, at first glance, abandoned.
Yes.
And we follow Juliet down into this silo as she removes, well, first she has to find her way in,
Yep.
and then she removes the bulky suit because her oxygen is running out.
And then countless obstacles. obviously.
Countless obstacles, right. She is problem solving her way
Yes.
through a number of obstacles. She's a fighter.
Yes.
She's got grit, and she's determined to survive out here
Yeah.
at all costs. And of course, she's obviously blown away by the fact that there is another silo and
Yeah.
other people here
Yeah.
who are all dead somehow.
Yeah.
What happened? What's going on? All the larger mysteries at play, of course, in this story. Really striking stuff.
Yeah.
And I really liked that there was a large midsection of the episode that could have been boring, but honestly was paced so well,
Yeah.
where she has to figure out a way to cross the bridge.
Oh, yeah. And
And-
it's also free of dialogue, so it's
No
pretty
dialogue.
intense. I mean,
Yeah.
But I agree. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was really well paced.
Yeah.
And I think the obstacles were present and difficult enough to be interesting without
Yeah.
overstaying their welcome.
Totally.
And it was satisfying
Yes.
to watch Juliet overcome things
Yes.
like crossing that bridge
Yeah.
to figure out who's on the other
Yeah.
side, that sort of thing.
And you expect that she's going to make it across. She's going to traverse the
Yeah.
obstacles that come her way. But I'm still, waiting with bated breath, just like I think all of us, as she's confronted by these situations. Like,
Yes.
is she going to make it across? Is she going to, is she able to penetrate further into the silo? And again, she is.
Yeah, it's really great stuff. And I think something, obviously we can't help but compare and contrast the book and the show, something the book lacks,
Yeah.
there's great tension in the Juliet entering the other silo chapters. And there are a number of obstacles she faces in the book as well. But I think this first episode of the show is an example of something this show has done super well since the first season,
Yeah.
since the first episode of the first season, which is slow down. Like, this
Oh,
is such an
totally.
excellent example
Totally.
of slow burn television
Yes,
that is
absolutely.
enjoyable
Yes.
to watch.
Yeah.
I think the
totally
first season
agree.
did that. It
Yeah.
expanded the story in a way where we had more time with basically everything,
Yep.
with the characters, with the story arcs, with the story beats and
Yes.
the moments and the interactions and relationships. More time with all of that.
Oh, yeah, totally.
We get more time with Juliet in this silo as well,
Yeah.
which is entertaining.
Yeah, I agree.
And then, of course, the episode wraps up on kind of a bombshell. The silo is not completely abandoned.
Yeah.
And there is a man behind a door
Oh, yeah.
who is threatening to kill Juliet if she tries to enter his room.
Yes, it is a pretty disturbing
Yeah.
conversation
Yes.
because he is talking to her like they're old friends initially.
Yes.
And has basically lured her there with the music that he was playing,
Mhm.
only then to kind of have a mini diatribe and threaten to kill her.
Yeah. Really wild stuff. And of course, we know from where we are in the book right now, this is the character Solo
Yep.
that she will meet. Interesting that he is antagonistic initially
Right.
here
Right.
in the show, which again, to me, makes a lot of sense. Like, logically speaking, if you have been stuck alone
Oh,
in
certainly.
a silo
Yeah.
for years,
Yeah.
decades,
Yeah.
any other human interaction is going to boggle your mind.
Yeah.
And your initial reaction is going to be fear.
Yeah.
And in the book, he's like very warm and
Right.
welcoming to Juliet.
Yeah.
I definitely like that at first here. There's some antagonism.
Yeah.
I suspect they'll get over it as the season goes on.
Yeah.
What did you think? What was your impressions of the first episode?
Yeah. I mean, back with a bang. I
Yes.
thought this was such a great start to the second season, and we also got to witness at the beginning of it in that first episode what every Silo generation fears, an uprising.
Yes.
And that, I mean, those initial scenes I thought were just phenomenal. We essentially get an experience watching this show that in many ways does reflect, I think, Hugh Howey's intent with the book,
Mhm.
and that we have definitely been really positive about in that it is so visually rich.
Oh,
And
yes.
in this medium, we also get a really rich soundscape, like just the footsteps of the kid running through to tell his father that he's got this message from Mechanical, the sound of that torch, when we see Juliet walking outside, the destruction and chaos and the bodies that are littered outside, just, I mean, phenomenal. And also the contrast with her like pristine white suit, I just thought that was such a beautiful juxtaposition of what essentially the intent of the silos were, which was to preserve the remnants of humanity. We've got theoretically the last 10,000 people that are bottled together in the silo, and they're doing their utmost to essentially like preserve whatever sanity and hygiene and whatever they can, and to see that pitted against the outside and what they fear, and also to see that it was ultimately a failed uprising. I mean, whether or not they succeeded in going outside, it's clear that outside is not a place that anybody in fact wants to be. So I thought this was such a honestly fantastic start to the second season here.
I agree. And what great storytelling. And again, these ideas are in the book, but I do think they're presented in either sort of a rushed way or a weaker, less impactful way in the book, where we see what can go wrong in an uprising, which is the very thing that the people in charge, the people in judicial, Sims, certainly Bernard, the authoritarian rulers of the silo, this is the thing they fear happening.
Exactly right.
And we see it happen.
Yeah.
And then we see the aftermath with Juliet walking through corpses littered everywhere. And I think that illustrates to us the great fear and illustrates to us why perhaps the silos were set up in the way they were, with this like authoritarian rule, with this very clear judicial IT conspiracy. And it's fascinating. I mean, to see it visualized in that way, I think is so powerful and so impactful.
Oh, absolutely.
And in fact, I think for Juliet to see it as well and to experience it herself.
Yeah.
Some other things I wanted to say about this first episode. I loved the flashbacks to Juliet's childhood.
Oh, yes.
So good.
Very effective.
Very effective.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, they set up for us this really beautiful relationship between Juliet and the folks of the Down Deep.
Yes, especially Shirley Walker.
Yes, yeah, some characters that we know and love from the first season that we know Juliet is close to.
Yes.
Juliet calling Walker in a moment of doubt in the first season, remember? When she's thinking about quitting the gig and Walker's like, you're up there to find the truth, girl.
The capital T truth.
Get up there and do it.
That's right.
So what if a man broke your heart, huh? That shouldn't stop you from finding the truth.
Right. Yeah.
So we see where that beautiful relationship came from through these lovely little flashbacks. And we see Juliet sort of adjusting to life in the Down Deep and her adaptability.
Yes.
But also the trauma that she has dealt with since childhood.
Totally.
You know, the how she lost her mother to suicide, how she was isolated from other children and had a difficult time connecting with other people.
Right.
We see a lot of beautiful character development and backstory being filled in for Juliet.
Yeah, totally.
I loved it. I think it establishes a really beautiful relationship. And again, from the book, we know an uprising is coming.
Yes.
Establishing that relationship makes the uprising make so much more sense too.
Oh, absolutely.
because it's personal.
Yes.
Walker, of all people, should be pissed.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Shirley as well.
Shirley should be up in
Yeah.
fucking
Oh,
arms.
absolutely. Yeah.
That her best friend
Yes.
has been sent out to clean because
Right.
of some goddamn conspiracy
Right.
by Bernard.
Right.
So I think, like, again, these ideas are in the book,
Yes.
but you really have to make some assumptions, and
Yeah.
they're less effective.
Yeah.
The TV show is like, here's the idea, here's the emotional gut punch.
Right.
Get ready because we're going to hit you over the head with this in the best way possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, you know, in talking about the book, we've had to at times kind of fill in those blanks ourselves. So
Yeah.
it is, absolutely satisfying to see that in taking on this new medium that, you know, both Hugh Howey, the creative team at Apple, were able to flesh out those arcs and those characters, and to really give kind of greater legitimacy and just like plausibility to their choices and their actions. I think certainly giving Juliet the flashbacks in where we can see Juliet develop that engineering mindset and just the instinct to, at every moment, solve the problem in front of her in whatever ingenious, you know, creative way that she can, is why when she finds herself in the other silo, it totally makes sense to us that she's able to surmount these obstacles, because we've seen that there's a lifetime behind every choice that she makes, which is just really excellent storytelling, you know, if nothing else.
It's great storytelling.
Yeah.
You also, I don't know if you wanted to chat about this now, but you were mentioning before we hit record that you had looked up some AMAs that Hugh Howey has done.
Yeah.
Not only about his book, but about the development of the TV show as well, which kind of gives us some really cool insight into how this TV show came together and why some of the changes, the quite dramatic changes were made.
Yeah, totally. And I'm looking at the comment here now. This is, to be fair, from 2 years ago, so a lot has transpired since. But let me just read it in full.
Yeah.
So this is Hugh Howey responding to a question about his involvement in the Silo television adaptation of his book. And he says, quote, "I've been involved from the very beginning, sitting in the room with Graham and the other writers as we plotted out the beats for the pilot and each of the 10 episodes. Usually I was the one suggesting big changes and deviations, and Graham was like, let's stick to the book."
Whoa!
Which I just thought was phenomenal. I loved hearing that, and I love that there was that kind of dynamic, a creative dynamic between the two of them, where it's really, this is a chance for Hugh Howey to really explore more of his universe and to bring to life the story of Wool in a way that really is his vision, you know, and you have to applaud that. I mean, for him to carry that vision through to this really delightful end is
it's been,
so
to be clear, it's been over a decade since he wrote Wool.
That's right.
And what a cool opportunity as a writer, as a creator, to revisit a universe and story that you told over a decade ago, and frankly, like, update it. Give it like another coat of paint, polish it out. Obviously, Hugh Howey has improved as a storyteller in the last decade of writing other books and stories and sequels. So to go back to an original work, honestly, props to him, because it must have been really cringy, you know, reading my own,
has to be.
Like, even like watching my own podcast episodes or going back to like short films I made as a kid. It's like impossible to watch that.
Of course.
You know, you're like, I am the worst person in the world. How
going backwards, it only gets worse and worse. You know?
It only gets worse.
Yeah.
So this must have been a really cool opportunity for Howey to go back to a story that I'm sure he wrote at a time where he was not as effective of a writer. And now to get to hone it further. To like really tell more of the story he perhaps wanted to back then.
And just how awesome it is to, and he says this, I think later in the AMA, that it was such a trippy experience to see characters that he'd written like come to life around him. And he was like walking in the midst of characters that were at one point nothing more than a figment of his imagination. Which is really just kind of.
Or imagine walking around the silo that you imagined in your head 10 years ago. And now you're on set.
Right.
That's cool. I'm really happy to hear how involved he was in the series. And honestly, it's cool to know that he was the one pushing for the changes. Because oftentimes, and like George R.R. Martin is the most recent example that comes to mind, he very publicly in a blog post was upset about the changes that House of Dragon made to his story,
Right.
And then clearly had to walk it back once the lawyers got on the phone with him. Hugh Howey kind of embracing the fact that like I get to retell my story.
Yeah.
I am not married to the thing I made 10 years ago.
Right.
And in fact, it's okay for me to lean into this new medium and tell the story in a different way.
Totally.
And he's clearly working with his partners who probably know more about film and TV storytelling, which is a vastly different set of tools than pen and paper on a book. And wow, this is very exciting to learn that like two people who really know their stuff are coming together and relying on each other to tell the best version of this story that they can imagine.
Yeah. And to be fair, and you know, obviously he's participating kind of throughout. The show does deviate from the book, but I will say it does still feel very faithful to the book. You know, like we're able to explore more of the Silo world and universe, but beat by beat, you know, it's interesting. I was kind of mentally comparing this to Three Body Problem and the Netflix adaptation that we obviously covered earlier this year. And you know, to your point about the great pacing of, you know, Wool in both the first and second season now, I think the thing that we most found kind of odd or, you know, a little curious when we were watching the Netflix adaptation of Three Body Problem was how much time was condensed into every episode. Yeah. You know, I think by the second episode, we were, you know, encountering things from the latter half of the book, you know?
Oh, so, for sure.
This is certainly not that experience. This feels like we are following, you know, a pretty close beat by beat, you know, take of the story. Yeah. Just with a fun kind of new creative, you know, perspective on it.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. Man, I'm enjoying it. This first episode was a blast. Props to Rebecca Ferguson for practically carrying 45 minutes of television by herself. Like minimal dialogue, and it's all just like physical acting from her, you know? And I was glued to my screen.
Oh, yeah.
So really just props to the creators behind this show. They understand what slow burn TV is all about. Exactly. They've selected a powerful cast of characters who are just magnetic to watch on screen. Yeah. Rebecca Ferguson killing it.
Yes. And then we get the introduction of Solo at the end of the first episode. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Solo becomes. You know?
How that plays out this season. Because we have an inkling of how it happens in the book. Yes. But now it'll be fun to kind of compare the other way, how the show handles it.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, folks. Well, that is season 2, episode 1. Some of our thoughts on it. Incredible job finding that AMA. I think that truly changes my whole perspective on the book show relationship. In a very positive way.
It's
I'm
synergistic.
so happy for Hugh Howey.
Oh, absolutely.
This is probably the thing most writers and artists dream of, is if the thing is getting reinterpreted, hand me the baseball bat and let me take another fucking swing at it, baby. You know?
And he did. And he knocked it out.
He knocked it out of the park. Really great season so far. If this first episode is indicative of season 2, I think we're in for a ride.
I agree.
And I can't wait to keep covering it, which we will continue to do on the show. So thank you so much for listening, folks, to this little bonus episode about Silo Season 2, Episode 1. We'll be covering Episode 2 next week when it comes out, and we'll try to keep up with episodes as they roll out and share our impressions in little bonus episodes like this one. We hope to catch you on the next one. Until then.
Toodles.
Doodles.